think he's unmuted himself.
Afternoon.
Hey.
A response. There we are.
Some
Good
technical
afternoon.
difficulties there.
This is Richard. This is Diarmid. Richard is close to us. Diarmid is far away from us.
Physically.
Yes, but with you in spirit.
Yes.
We're talking about spirit again. Wait until Doug comes in.
Let's not go down that again.
And then Richard knows Doug as well.
Yes, we're. I'll just fill you in whilst there's a pause here. We're in the business of black soldier flies, and we're putting a bioconversion unit, which is a 20-foot shipping container, onto Doug's farm to capture food waste and feed his chickens.
Very good. How many chickens does he have?
Well, he has quite a few at the moment, but he's going to cut that down. He's got a big shed. That shed's going, and he's going to replace that with arcs that are mobile around the farm.
Right.
And so one arc has about 2,400 birds, and one of our boxes can feed one arc. So it works out quite neatly.
Obviously, that's a very rich protein source. I have poultry too, and poultry nutrition is my study alongside some of this composting stuff. So rather than go down that more complex and frankly I'm entirely ignorant route, I'm trying to grow various pulses, beans, peas and lupins, to try and substitute the soya in the diet.
Well, so everyone's trying to substitute soya. So Doug is growing mixed grains and pulses and lupins and stuff. In fact, he's growing them all together, I think, in an unusual and innovative way. And then we're trying to supplement, I think by dry matter, only about 5.5% of the diet with black soldier fly.
All right.
And that talking to Premier Nutrition, that's about the maximum we can squeeze in. Because when they're hot, right now legislation requires the black soldier fly to be whole and live, not processed. Next year, maybe we're allowed to process them. Then we could defat them. But whilst they're full fat, a bit like milk, whilst they're full fat, there's only so much you can push into a chicken.
Yes. And
no, you would know this better than me, sorry.
Well, are they stacked full of amino acids?
They're stacked full of amino acids.
Methionine, lysine, the headliners that we need for poultry.
Yeah, no, it's a good amino acid profile. So that bit's fine, but they're also about 20% fat lipids. So it's the lipids that become the limiting factor rather than anything else. That's why.
Have you considered installing a gym in your box so that they can, work the weights, and actually increase that that's muscle to fat percentage, because it sounds like they're lazy bastards just laying about with all that food and accumulating a big pot belly.
Actually, we are at least making the chickens move because we're broadcasting.
I'm not talking about chickens. I'm talking about your larvae there. Just basically the larvae basically just going.
The larvae. Oh, now that's even more complex. Dumbbells for the larvae. Good video.
Yeah. TikTok forever.
Actually, if we feed the larvae on dairy waste, they really pile on the weight, and they do get genuinely fat, like I do when I eat cheese. So, and also at different points in the life cycle, they have more and less fat. They load a load of fat at the end before they crystallize, because they got a little store of energy for the second phase of their lives, where they don't eat as adults. So they have to really load it in before they transform.
What are you substituting out of the diet for 5%?
Well, yeah, so I don't think Doug was feeding soya anyway, but I may be wrong on that point. But if he was feeding soya, then we're substituting soya. If he wasn't feeding soya, then we're bringing in a protein source that has been created from food waste from his other business. So it's fruit and veg goes into the bugs, and then the bugs go into the chickens.
Yeah.
So we're trying to become circular and more local. Ultimately, trying to create the, first of all, soya-free egg and then carbon neutral egg.
Yeah.
But that requires a little sequestration on the land, on the farm, planting of trees. But the frass from our boxes go onto the land. The chicken poo goes onto the land. So we should pump up the carbon in the land quite nicely and have a carbon credit to offset to create big carbon neutral eggs. That's the plan.
Yeah, the nice fellow Glenn, I've forgotten his second name.
Mitchell.
Yes, he believes, he states with such authority that trees are a waste of time storing carbon. We need the carbon in the soil where we can grow crops. And we're infinitely more efficient at thumping carbon into the soil than we are at growing trees. So he says, trees is a waste of time. If you grow them, the carbon's somewhere else where you don't need it necessarily. We want it in the soil so that we can grow crops in it. And I quite like that. I quite like the simplicity of his argument. And so his idea is just to promote better farming methods in order that we store more and more carbon in the ground.
Great. Who's going to disagree with that? It probably doesn't do any harm to plant a few trees, get a bit of shade, get other stuff going.
100%.
We were talking when Daniel came over about, if you take an extreme example of a desert and you start pushing organic matter into it and just improve it, of course, that's almost zero carbon to potentially loads of carbon.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And that picks up on the the Sparks 2003 idea that if there is an infinite amount of materials everywhere that's present on the planet, then it's present in the desert too. It's just there's no soil biology and not pick it up. But the guy today was arguing that he believes in that as a principle, but he suggests that the depth of where the minerals are available, if we've been mining the top 100 mil, then we don't have a lot right at the top, and we need to get root structures and exudates down in order to pull up the minerals from down below to pull it up top. And so he said there might be a delay in trying to get minerals from down there up there.
Makes sense.
Which I like. Daniel, what do you think?
That's an interesting thought. Dr. Ingham always stresses about sort of opening up the compaction layer so that the roots can go down. If what you're saying, has a lot of merit, then basically, yeah, but the question is sort of, okay, we're doing this in the first 10 centimeters. But does it mean that we exploit the parent material asymmetrically, meaning that, some of the total pool nutrients get extracted more than the others? Because if it's the same material, and let's say all of that material is being mined in the same way, so then basically it should just shrink in volume rather than sort of being emptied, leaving like an empty shell of some minerals that are used less than others, basically. So I don't know. It's a good thing to think about, I think.
Yeah, there's just so many little ideas firing around just now. It's really difficult. Every time I speak to somebody, everybody's got another little idea of how to make things work. I mean, he said, if you can get the nitrogen cycling working, there's no reason why we can't grow 4 ton to the acre organically. And I said, have you done it? No. Have you done it in Scotland? No. But he believes it's true.
What was the preposition again?
If you got nitrogen cycling working in the soil, then you could produce as much as you wanted to.
Yeah, that's a great one. It's like I think the one thing that a week ago, basically, I got really thinking about doing more small plot trials. In terms of one of the variables I'm thinking of is sort of like what would be the loading of the extracts that we produce, for instance, onto the volume of the soil that will be required to get to the to the yield response, right? Or at least to establishing the microbes, things like that. What will be like the average loadings? Like, so people, talk about using 2 pounds of compost to the acre, like Dr. David Johnson puts on the seeds, right? And then we've not been sort of going down below 70 liters of compost per hectare. And, when Dr. Ingham talks about this, she says, use a ton of compost per acre. And the question is, you know, it's really about establishing these microbes. And then so, you know, if you're sure that they're established, first of all, then you can really test. And I think most of the stuff that people talk about is hearsay, anecdotes, and guesswork.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. Because the idea, I think we've been chatting about it last couple of weeks, is the idea that you could sprinkle some magic dust, some extract, the products you're talking about, and in fact anybody's products, if the ground is not ready for it, it's kind of a waste of time. If you've got no decent humus there in order to start the process to hold the bugs and use the bugs, then you're up against it all the time. So I'm beginning to look at it the other way. Well, maybe I need to get a strong growing humus layer first, get it smashed into the soil, and then sprinkle some bugs on the top, and then let everything has to work together for it to work.
Some of the things that I've got in mind, for instance, you know, there's Dr. Elizabeth Stockdale from NIAB, you know, she says to me that she spent the majority of her life basically looking at what bugs are in the soil, and then what can you do to support them. Right. I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, well, let's say we use the bugs to increase the organic matter because they grow on their own and they grow the quickest, right? So, for instance, there's bacteria in there already. Let's feed the bacteria. They increase in, you know, in the soil because we'll be just feeding the you know, whatever foods we put out there. You know, let's say some sugary, carbony, you know, stuff, the stuff that we've been experimenting here with, for instance, like the, you know, FPJ from root vegetables, for instance. Let's say we use that to feed the microbes, and then we come in with lots and lots of flagellates, you know, just pouring compost teas on it constantly, just basically flagellate city to start the nutrient cycling, get it going. And this is obviously whilst, you know, the plants are growing as well, right?
Yeah.
So then, you know, nutrient cycling, and then we come in with the fungi to reach which, you know, increase the fungal counts, you know, until basically they settle, but just basically have, you know, support the very basic layer first, so that it's just bulges out like kefir, you know, in the soil. I don't know, things like that. You know, it's a very complex matter to figure this one out.
But the frustration for me or for you in that situation would be the farmer comes along and puts on a full fungicide spray, or puts on 200 units of fertilizer and just wipes out all the work that you've just done.
Well, this is basically, you know, why we exist, to avoid that completely. And so, you know, I think where most biocontrols basically have failed in the past is because they've always been considered as part of a conventional system. And I just don't see how this can work like that. You know, in some experimental setup, maybe yes, but in practice, it's going to be like you describe it.
Yeah. And the hardest thing for you to monetize what you're doing is to persuade the farmer that he's not really allowed to put 200 units of fertilizer on, nor is he allowed to use the standard full program. Otherwise, your stuff's not going to work, or it's not going to work apparently.
Well, this is just, you know, why I'm raising funds, so that basically, you know, the whole point is that I can do the research work, so that the farmer basically and you guys can watch me, kind of thing, you know, and obviously then, you know, when we're ready, then we can go to farmers and say, okay, let's start doing commercial trials, and we're doing this on the basis that it's risk-free for you. The people that I'm signing up for for winter wheat, I'm just basically saying I'm going to basically match your costs, so you're not spending more than you're spending on your chemicals. We're going cold turkey, and I'm going to pay for the difference in yield.
It's a high risk strategy you're going for.
Yeah, I know. I don't care.
I mean, it depends.
I don't see any other way to do it. It's like basically Elon Musk decides, you know, like, you know what? Maybe we're going to put an electric car in the Volkswagen, electric engine in the Volkswagen, you know, and then, you know, swap the batteries. Maybe we'll build kits, You know, well, when you have your Volkswagen, you know, you can basically just put the electric motor and swap the tank for the battery. You know, you're gonna have a 60 mile range. You'll be good for the shops. Makes no sense.
Well, I think where we argue when we take soya out of the diet and then the farmers. So the traditional problem I have when I take our feed to a farmer or a buyer of feed, and they very smugly buyers say, how much is your food? Because don't forget, I pay £250 a ton for soya. How much is yours, Richard? And they wait for you to say some considerably larger number than 250. Okay, soya's gone up a little bit now, but even so, it's not. We're probably £800 a ton or something like that. It's expensive compared with
1,100 organically.
1,100 organic.
Soya expeller for me.
Okay, 1,100. Okay, okay.
Really, one point of value for Richard from this conversation. There you go. Thank you, Jeremy.
So what my argument to them is, look, you pay a little bit more on some of the feed going in, but then you get out of it. This is the point I was going to make back to Daniel, is what you get out of it is an egg, which is soya free or carbon neutral. And that is worth 2 or 3 pence more than your current egg. And that more than outweighs that tiny bit of additional cost that you've put on to your feed. And if that's true, and we've got to prove that, but to your point, Daniel, if you then have a regime, so you take a couple of acres of the farmer's land and you do that technique, what you're producing is whatever is growing, barley, which is organic or different or better or something, and may command a premium. And that should certainly be factored into your proposition to them.
It will do. It will do basically if they see the same yield as conventional. And the reason
they make it a lower yield but a better cost.
No, they can't. That's the thing. They can't, because the thing is, if the farmer, you know, sees a drop in the yield in year one and they don't have the cash flow to survive the conversion process, they're not going to do it. So my job basically is to match the yields. My job is literally what nobody's been able to do for whatever reason, at least in this country, for the longest time, which is match conventional yields with organic, right? So the bar is stupidly high, you know, for the microbes.
I don't understand your argument. If the yield goes down by 10%,
no,
but the value goes up by 10%, you're back where you were.
Yes, but you need to understand, Richard, that the value won't go up unless you're organically certified.
And that takes 3 years.
Yes, I know. I know there's a timing issue here, but it's the same as my argument with the eggs. You know, if you may have one less egg, but you got 10% more return.
100%, but Daniel's trying to do it in a shock the system way. And it would work with me because I'm already organic and I've been organic for a long time. But it doesn't work with what he's trying to do. He's trying to open up the idea of reduced inputs to the mass market. And the mass market doesn't really even believe in it, which is why he has to go to the extreme of trying to pay the idiot farmer to be a better farmer. Very frustrating. Farmers are the dumbest people because they get these subsidies all the time.
That's true. They all calculated basically with the subsidies, and if basically you know, the subsidy stops, and they look at the same land they've just basically been growing, I don't know, some biodiversity scheme over the years because they've been paid, and it's like, I'm gonna plow it now.
Yeah.
It's like, because I'm not getting paid for it anymore. It's like,
yeah.
So this is the same. This is the same reason why, you know, my conversations with people like the Wildlife Trust, you know, across the country are completely meaningless. Because, you know, like, they just basically look at, oh, the farmer's got hedges. We need to look after the hedges, the biodiversity in the hedges. Like, would you like your butterflies to be fed with the whole field and not just the bloody hedge?
Yeah.
Actually, talking of subsidies, under the ELMS scheme, if that, and I no means understand ELMS, but my understanding is, you may know better than me, that is linked to the carbon in the soil, And again, I think if that's true, then again, I think as well as taking into account the value of the end product, I think you have to take the value to the soil contributing to the ELMS payment if a regime increases the carbon in the soil.
Yes. Yeah, have you investigated that at all? That would be a good in.
This is something now that somebody would need to sort of fill us in, about what really the ELMS, because the ELMS actually keep changing, and they will change for the next 5 years. They will keep changing basically because they're building it. It's not a done deal yet. Yeah. So I think that's still going to be changing. The initial ELMS that came in this year, from what I understand, are less ambitious than people were hoping for. And what we're trying to do basically is completely ignore legislation and completely ignore current systems. We just basically want to come in and say, like, well, here it is. This is, the best thing since sliced bread. Yeah. And then all of the stuff around it, if you implement this, then all of the stuff around it will basically benefit you. And that's basically, what we're trying to build. And I guess that's why it's interesting, and that's why, as you say, it could be frustrating. Because it's just so difficult, technically difficult, requires a lot of hands.
Yeah, yeah. And we don't have whatever the Scottish equivalent is going to be, we don't have it yet.
All right.
So okay. I can't help you with that.
I'm not sure. You talk about a farmer coming in and then just putting a herbicide on, or putting a pesticide on, or putting some NPK on. I'm not sure that an approach that fosters the microbes in the soil is consistent with any farmer other than an organic farmer. So trying to convince, I think you first have to convince the farmer. I think you have to preach to the organic farmers, not the traditional artificial fertilizers.
No, the Armit is like the exception of the rule here. And the thing is that organic farmers, they've got their stuff sorted, but they're very few and far between, especially in arable. And I spoke with the Soil Association, and I basically just strained my tongue speaking to these people. And the thing is that I would love to basically just have them just jump onto this and just pull all of the resources they can to make this a reality. But they seem more cynical than the regenerative farmers. So I'm just what I'm basically doing is I'm really what we're building is very, very disruptive to the whole thing. Yeah, both the conventional and the organic. And all I'm trying to do is basically just save the farmer, the money, make the farmer more money, and then everybody benefits. We get more organic food and we store carbon in the soil. So
so I take a different line from that. I wouldn't go after the hardest-headed, hard-nosed farmer that I could find to try and convince him. I would go after the likes of Doug, who are already on the right page, and say, okay, your bugs complement our system, Richard. Whack some bugs onto the farm.
There is no doubt. The people that that we have on the list here, basically, these are people who already have started their regenerative journey, right? They're not necessarily even considering going organic. A lot of them will basically tell us like, organic, regenerative is the way, glyphosate to terminate crops. And the thing is that I'm quite happy basically just to then work with them, because they're often just basically are interested in regenerative from the perspective of cutting costs, from the perspective of reducing their inputs. And so that mindset is what we need. They basically see that they're getting hammered with costs, and it would be beneficial for them not to lose the yields whilst they're cutting the costs.
I'm not with you on that. Personally, when I was at agriculture college, you had a high input, high output system, biggest tractor you can buy, maximum amount of spray, tons of fertilizer. Oh, look, 10 tons per hectare, brilliant. and you become totally addicted to the whole system. You're buying Monsanto seeds, you're buying everything's done, GMO, blah, you buy into the whole high input, high output system. And yet, now, the alternative isn't a low input, high output system. That's just not going to happen. You're going to have a medium input or low input, low output system where your inputs cost less and are less disruptive, and your output is less. It may have greater value, but it's less. And the fact is, you're just trying to balance two things off against the high input, high output system or a low input, low. You just got to make an edge. You've just got to make a profit. I don't see you having a low input, high output system. Frankly, I think that's aspirational.
Well, somebody has to have that aspiration, though, because again, without that sort of aspiration, you wouldn't be sitting here, on Zoom. Somebody had the aspiration to build these computers.
Well, I don't know. I personally, I love the idea of a low input, low output system. For me, that's not saying low input, low output and looking after the land is not at all a negative to me.
But it is for the government. But it is for the government, and I can tell you, I'm the only person talking about this. Nobody else talks about this. There's farmers, and even the Elm scheme is actually quite surprising to hear this coming from the government, because I think it's going to basically bite them in their asses. What's going to happen basically at some point is most farmers will basically figure out that they can cut their inputs, but they're going to have lower yields, because that's how it works in that paradigm that you actually think in as well, Richard, because you're thinking in that paradigm of input output, that there has to be an input to get an output. We live in a completely different paradigm. We live in a paradigm where we're not counting our input. We're counting the mechanism that we create in the soil doing the work. So the thing is, in the current paradigm, you're right. They're basically looking to reduce their inputs, which are costly right now. They're going to get a hit on the yield, but their profit margins increase. That's what they're after. And so what the problem is that for decades, there've been a run, for higher yields, which basically meant that, we could feed more people, right? There's 66 million people in this country. They have to be fed. This grain has to come from somewhere. Ukraine has just been attacked, and the thing is that when 50% of farmers suddenly start producing less yield, the government's going to turn around and was like, what happened? Where's bread? And then basically they're going to come back. They're going to come back. They're going to get lobbied by Bayer, who's going to say to them, look, you have to increase the spending on fertilizers and on crop protection. Because only that way you're going to receive higher yields. And they're going to get hammered again to put those things onto the field to increase those yields.
I've no doubt there's going to be those pressures. I fully agree.
And so I think, the only way, Richard, I'm sorry to cut you off like that. The only way I see this is if you produce a real alternative. And I see nobody trying to do this. And this is why, maybe we're absolutely, completely insane. And I ask myself, I promise you that, I ask myself that question on a weekly basis. Am I just a gullible, insane townie, thinking that this can be done? And the thing is that I keep asking questions, what needs to happen to make this reality? I see a lot of anecdotal data and I see scientific papers of pieces of the puzzle in various places around the world. Oh. And the thing is that all of these pieces of the puzzle point to that being a reality. And all of the questions that we basically find along the way as we're trying to figure this out, the moment I stop having questions, I've answered all of the questions, and the result is you can't have a microbial cover crop system, whatever, regenerative system, with the same yields as a synthetic input system. If the answer is basically no, you can't have that after all of that work, then I'll give up, because basically I'll just disprove the whole thing for the whole world. But until basically I don't have a solid answer like that, I see no reason of basically not thinking it's possible. So Sorry.
Well, it's a fair enough target to have. I'm not sure that I would agree that not achieving the maximum yields without artificial fertilizer and chemicals is the only definition of success.
Of course, you can have progress in the meantime. Sure. You know, it's the old adage, right? Aim for the stars, reach the moon. But the thing is that, you know, there's many benefits from doing what you described, you know, where you basically, you know, decrease the inputs but have healthy soil, you know, people turn to organic and then store carbon. All these things can work. But you know, to really have an impact, I really don't see it any other way. To be able to show on 50 farms across the country on 5 hectares each, and each farmer is different. Each farmer is, you know, is a different entity basically with a different system, because they all have a different system always. Even though everybody grows, you know, wheat, barley, and oilseed rape, and they all have a different soil situation, you know, a bit of a different weather and whatnot, different equipment. And then basically, you know, the point is, if we can show that on 50 farms, 5 hectares each, basically in the same year, that we have achieved between 80 and 100% of the conventional yield on that field, then there's nothing stopping us.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. Where if the government has brought in, if ELMS is as we maybe think it is, it's not done yet. I agree, and that results in a 30% reduction in yield, and we grow half our own food, broadly speaking. So we've lost 15% of our food. Has got to come from somewhere else. And then what we generally do around these problems is just import a bit more and don't really care about the carbon footprint.
And I don't think they're going to go for that now. I don't think they will go for that now. And I think the ELMS originally were designed for that, because I think the country was moving towards the, you know, outwardly they're talking, we're going to be the knowledge-based economy. We're just going to make ideas and somebody else is going to produce it. But our ideas, the cost of production is very, very low in comparison. So it's going to be high value. And, you know, this is the knowledge-based economy. This is literally how they think about this. This is the highest level of civilization. You know, agriculture is down here, just providing the freedom for people to do other things. Concentrated, intensive agriculture simply is there to provide other people the freedom to do other things. And it's because now they don't have to think about food. And if you get to the situation where agriculture in the UK just is slipping further and further, and it's not because of people eating more bananas, it's actual productivity, they're going to take notice, especially in a situation like right now, where you've got you know, the conflict in Ukraine, because they're going to go like, uh-oh.
Well, I think even COVID highlighted the fragility of long supply chains, dragging the stuff all the way from Suez crisis, couldn't get from China, soya coming all the way from Brazil, and then the war on top of that. It's just proving, for me, that's just proving long supply chains are really risky in times of uncertainty. Look, lots of times of uncertainty coming. Let's outsource all our food to somewhere else and hope it's all okay. Yeah. And it's just rubbish for me. I would up the homegrown food up to about 80%, and I'd still be worried about the 20%. I certainly wouldn't take the 50% any lower than it is now.
Yeah, we should grow everything except bananas. Well,
arguably, and bananas should be a treat, not a everyday's essential.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know whether the public will go with that or not. I strongly suspect that part of the public going with that is whether we escape in the next 10 years out of the conundrum we've got ourselves into. And I'm not convinced that that's going to be achievable, to be honest.
The public voted for Boris Johnson.
Yes, enough said.
Do you think you can negotiate with an irrational public?
Did they actually vote for him?
England did.
Was there an actual election where he got elected?
Well, he was the prime minister when the public elected the Conservatives. But they probably didn't get 50% of the vote. They probably got enough of the vote to get enough people in Parliament to I'm not sure we. why did Trump got elected? I mean, the general public shouldn't be underestimated by the stupid decisions they can make. We left Europe. I'm not sure that was such a smart idea, to be honest. But
Well, Richard, you've got to persuade them that eating your carbon-friendly low soya eggs are a good thing when they're made from flies. That's a marketing booster.
I mean, that is the. There's two critical factors for us in the next 12 months. One is the bioconversion unit has to be as efficient as we expect it to be. You should be able to take 130 tons of food waste, make it into 20 tons of larvae every year. Those are the sort of parameters we're trying to achieve. So we just got to make that happen. That's pretty much straightforward. But the second question is exactly that. Because it costs more than soya, the egg has to have a premium of X above that. And we're trying to get some people to do some work on that now. Funnily enough, the mentor that we have for our current Innovate UK scheme works for a company that does exactly that. And he's got a conflict of interest when I said to him, well, I'll pay your company to do it then with the funds that you're giving me. And check, oh, hang on, it's all too complicated. But there will be somebody out there, because so here's my example. I went to Waitrose the other day. Okay, Waitrose is a top end sort of supermarket, but the eggs per egg range from 17 to 58p each egg. Right, it's a monstrous range. And there's Red Tractor, there's organic, there's happy chickens, sad, suicidal chickens, whatever chickens you want. Every single brand you can imagine. And soon to that shelf will come carbon neutral and soya free. And people will pay a premium. The question is, what is that premium and what is the size of that market where they pay that premium? And if there's enough people willing to pay that premium, then we exist. And if there isn't, well, nobody gives a toss, so we don't bother.
See, the thing is, I completely want to, I like the way you're thinking. This is very, very business-like thinking. I just prefer the idea of flipping these kind of calculations upside down. I love the book One Straw Revolution by Masanobu Fukuoka. He was absolutely pissed when he found out that his fruit in Tokyo was sold at 2.5 times premium because it was organic and natural, and he pulled it from the shops. And I don't believe that the long-term solution to this is basically asking the consumers to keep spending more, and maybe doing stuff 1p, 2p there, or 10p whatever on the egg is a way to go. But what we're working on is not on eggs. We're mostly interested in wheat and barley, and organic bread is basically non-existent. Waitrose, yeah, go to Waitrose, but how many people shop at Waitrose? How many people shop at Tesco's? If you go to Tesco's, there's artisan bread. You can buy artisan bread, but it's not organic. And
if you're saying that the organic market is smaller than the mass market, of course it's true. And you're going after convincing the mass market, and I'm going after the pointy end of the Waitrose lady shopper. And that's two different strategies. And one will be successful.
Oh, completely. I completely agree. What I'm trying to say is basically, I'd like one of two things basically to happen, and the more natural thing would be more farmers basically converting to organic with our help, and then basically getting the higher markups in the beginning. And then once you saturate it, and there's more and more organic producers, the supply increases, then the price comes down. Because at the moment,
yeah, absolutely.
The two things that actually don't allow the expansion of the amount of organic bread being sold in the country is that on one end, there's the farmer who is going to lose 50% of their yield if they stop using their inputs. And in the 2 years that it takes for them to get the certification in year 3, they can go bankrupt if they don't have the funds. And on the other end, you've got consumers who are only on the pointy end, and they're paying 4 to 12 pounds a loaf for organic bread if they can find it. So I don't believe, there's going to be, a lot of families that are going to be driving the demand. And I don't believe there's going to be any farmers driving the supply. It's a stalemate right now. And I've looked at the whole thing. I've looked at the entire chain. you know. And so basically the farmers are not moving, the grain merchants don't care, because the demand is not growing, and the demand is not growing because it's too high, that the prices are too high. So something has to move. So this is why we exist, and this is why, you know, we're so ambitious about that, you know, reaching that yield potential. You know, Dr. Elaine Ingham keeps telling us that if you have the whole system working, the plant should be growing to its full genetic potential. And we have seen that in pockets, you know, where basically, you know, this has been demonstrated. So it's just a matter basically on making this on an industrial scale.
Where? Is there proof of that?
It's just anecdotal stuff.
Just
you can go on my LinkedIn, and on my pinned post, there's a 103-page PDF with examples that my friend Riley Layton put together.
If it were absolutely true, then people would consistently grow 4 ton an acre organically, or 4 ton an acre with low inputs, year after year of wheat.
Yeah, but the control trials that are necessary for this to be repeatable and reliable, all of that stuff never actually happened. And so, you know, only now, for instance, Dr. Ingham is getting a farm north of Oregon, where a farmer who's very well connected with high-end music industry, basically, and he makes parties, you know, with all the sort of, you know, famous musicians. Basically, he's getting lots of money for the farm to become a research center. You know, only now, sort of like she's going to be looking at and getting that stuff done. And so all of the work that she, for instance, have done throughout her career was working with individuals of big farms around the world as a consultant. And when they sort of converted and, you know, they dropped their costs and, you know, they increased their profit margins, they didn't care about anything else. So those are sort of like the cases of what the regenerative farmers are doing now. Let's drop the cost, increase, and basically, you know, if we decrease the yield, so be it. Oftentimes it would increase the yield. In cases like soya, for instance, where they were growing half a ton per acre, basically, and, you know, they tripled their yield with biologicals. Oh, amazing! So to 1.5 tons, you know. So the thing is that you know, things like that, you know, make you think, you know, okay, well, what is the real possibility? And you really need to do those control trials. It has to be repeatable. It has to be demonstrated in many places to be able to have a valid working system.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what made you go organic as a farmer? And were you previously high input and then went to organic, or what was your journey?
No, my parents converted a field in 1988, and they've always been very green-minded since very early on. My mum ended up being a Green MSP in the Scottish Parliament for a term.
Okay.
But we kept a block of 50% of the arable land conventional to support our chickens, our broilers. We had a broiler shed. We needed to grow 200 tons of wheat. So we grew that in a standard rotation conventionally, and it was fine up until we were disinvited from growing broilers. At which point I had a look at the numbers, and the numbers didn't support what we were doing anyway. So we converted the rest of the farm in 2015. Okay. And by that time, we'd been doing organic on and off, with degrees of success for 20 years. But we had confidence that we could run with it, along with the organic subsidy that the Scottish Government gives us.
And you feel that I know, obviously perhaps, but just for clarification, you run an organic system which you think is financially sustainable, albeit with a little bit of help from the government.
Yes. Yeah, if we didn't get the help from the government, it would still be successful. It
would still be.
Yeah, but the headline numbers are half the yield for twice the value. Wheat is as straightforward as we would get 4 ton to an acre of conventional, and we get 2 ton to an acre organically, but it's twice the price, and it's always twice the price.
It almost has to be twice the price, otherwise you don't grow it.
Yes, but Daniel's point is quite an interesting point from an aspirational point of view. If you were able to double your yields organically, you wouldn't need an organic premium, and you could feed everybody. If you could double your yields organically. But I'm now sitting in a position where financially I can afford to take risks and suffer some poor yields. We won't suffer poor yields because we know what we're doing. But we can now punch a wee bit harder and see if we can go from 2 ton to 3 ton.
Absolutely, yeah. Brilliant.
Whether we get there or not, but if the theory's there, I like following the theory.
What I think Doug is doing is getting back into rotations. And when I was at Harper Adams 1,000 years ago, they talked about rotations, and subsequently, when I finished my training, everyone seems to have dumped that in favour of big tractors, big fields, and high inputs. And who cares about the soil? And then somebody turns around and says, "There's only 17 seasons left, and then all the soil's gone." well, whoever saw that coming? And so going back to the common sense, the way your grandparents used to farm rotational, putting their nutrition back in the soil, it's not magic, is it? You know, it doesn't all come from a bag of artificial fertilizer with NPK in it. You've got to love the soil and plan. You've got to work in the long term. You've got to think about it. It's not a short-term business. So I mean, personally, if I had a farm, it would be organic regardless. And in fact, I wouldn't have a farm that was high input, high output and just beat the soil to death every year.
It doesn't make any sense. But the issue is that the education in our systems, in all our universities and colleges teaching farmers, is based on the Second World War. It's not based on what Daniel's saying, it's based on conventional theory, which is based on chemicals. Everything that we've learned, so everything that our grandfather has learned has been abandoned.
Yes, I fully agree. That's exactly what I'm saying. And that's why we have to go back to some common sense approach. You know, I mean, even plastic bags, you know, you can cite 100 examples in the last 30 or 40 years that we've done wrong. Filling the world up with plastics is one of them. Glyphosate was mentioned, you know, that's just generally poisoning ourselves. So there's 1,000 things we've done wrong. And I believe we can, well, actually, I don't believe. I don't know whether mankind has the wit to get back to a stable sort of ecological situation where we feed ourselves safely and sensibly, or whether there's just too many of us. I suspect at getting on for 8 billion, there's just too many of us, and we're not smart enough.
Nature normally finds a way to tell us. If it's by starvation or disease, then it will.
No, I fully agree. I think the Earth is safe enough. It'll just take care of these pesky human beings in some way or another. And the question is, what are we gonna? Are we all going to be here, or a third of us going to disappear?
But look what Daniel's up against. You're saying that Doug is just beginning to learn about rotation again.
Yeah, that's a misquote, because I have no idea. I'm sure he's always been rotating. What he's going to do is put his chickens onto the ground, and then they're going to poo everywhere, and then the cows are going to come and eat the grass, and the carbon's going to go up in the soil. That's whether he's always done that or not, but that is a sensible way of doing business.
Yes, but there are people who grow wheat after wheat after wheat.
Yes.
And Elaine Ingham says that you can do that, but you can do it without inputs. But the people who grow wheat after wheat after wheat have to battle with disease because they put 200 units of nitrogen on, which winds up the wheat plant and causes such great disease that they then need to use an incredibly large amount of chemical in order to defend itself. Whereas if the buggers rotated their crops, it wouldn't be so much of a problem. Now, Daniel's got to speak to farmers that stupid that he's got to try and persuade them that there's a different way to do it.
Well, it's Daniel versus Big Chemical.
It is.
And that's the problem. Big Chemical's got all the money, and they like to sell all those fertilizers in every year, and life carries on great so long as you can do that. And there's Daniel, one person trying to stop this monstrous machine. And there's big pharmaceuticals, big tobacco. They're all pretty bad news for the planet.
Yeah, but I've got a chance because I live in my own little world where I can do what Daniel's saying. I've got the financial model to protect myself from it. And if we can actually just make the damn thing work and do 4 ton an acre of wheat, everybody would.
Oh no,
everybody
no,
would
I don't disagree with that. I think that's the holy grail. The thing, the egg price for me and the yield. You know, I think as the volumes of use of insects go up, then the cost of insect meal comes down, and we become mainstream. And then
Exactly.
I'm not opposed to good yields. Everyone's got to be fed, and we've just got to be smarter.
Daniel's point is that if all that were to happen and price came down, then the price of eggs could come down, then everyone could benefit. People in Tesco's, not just in Waitrose. It's the same thing as doubling the yield. If you can increase the output from flies and generate protein better, then it doesn't need to go up in price. And that's Daniel's argument as well from the other side. Very brave argument. Your marketing, your idea is more linear. Your idea is pretty straightforward. Let's create a niche. Let's sell to the niche. Daniel's trying to do the hero thing. He's probably got Superman underpants on.
Almost certainly. The thing is, the other thing to remember is we're trying to feed our bugs on the 10 million tons of food waste produced in this country every year, which is a beautifully circular and sensible thing to do. You know, if we could, whichever sector we're selling to, if we could take that big pile of food waste and segment it and put some into AD, some into for composting, some into bugs, and bugs into chickens and chickens into eggs. I mean, that for me is just common sense.
It should be mandatory.
Yes, exactly.
Waste should be outlawed, and therefore it should create a gate price that benefits what you're trying to do.
I fully agree.
There's there's a lot to say about that. You know, this whole thing, circular economy. I mean, I think it was 17 or 1800s, but so like it was very early on in the US history where already the desertification was happening due to poor management of the soil, and they started importing human manure from China to be able to prop up the yields over there. So literally, it was called night soil, and they would import, the whole ships would come in from China of human poo.
Yeah.
The US. And the thing is, it could be done smarter in here, because and this could still work in the old paradigm. At the moment, there are issues with imbalances of nutrients, for instance, in waste streams. And that basically prevents farmers from, making heads or tails of how to work with it in the first place. They have to scratch their head every time. Like, with synthetics, like, this many kilograms of that, and boom, job done, right?
Oh, yeah.
With waste, they have to scratch their heads all the time. And so, there could be, this is a business case basically for somebody to do it in a smart way, where they process it either chemically or biologically. Biologically would be my preferred method, but with batch measurements, of what they're actually doing in terms of the nutrient composition, for instance, knowing exactly what they're producing, and then a regular agronomist could make the calculations, right? So I think there's contamination issues, obviously. So there is a lot of opportunity, and I think what you're doing, Richard, is absolutely necessary, fantastic, and not less heroic than what we're trying, I think, because using that waste stream is it's fantastic. It's a great thing. And my background is a little bit of permaculture, and everything that you talk about that Doug is trying, that has been promoted by permaculture since the beginning of the 80s, using chicken mobiles, using basically a continuous loop of nutrient streams, even on the farm. That's something that that permaculture has been, it's in the permaculture manual from 1988. So it's not something that people are only waking up to this. But I think it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just up until now, it's been lacking individuals with enough strength basically to lead, and enough basically stamina to push forward through a lot of uncertainty, to find that business case, because this is the limiting factor. And also, you know, but there's a lot of converging things right now that obviously are helping that business case. So it's just.
But also, I think the high input, high output system is starting to look more flawed every year, with the glyphosate getting into every bit of food, and the cost of fertilizer, the loss of topsoils and organic matter. It's just that the high input, high output system is unsustainable. And so that's going to get worse and worse. You could put more and more chemicals into it, trying desperately to survive, more a slave to the big chemical companies. And that is clearly an unsustainable journey that people are on. So not only is the alternative being developed, hopefully by the likes of yourself, but the current system, high input, high output, is starting to look very shaky, in my opinion. And I think that's what's driving the change, is a necessity to find an alternative way of doing things.
Yep. If Daniel can punch the research through quickly, then he's in the right place now to benefit from that, because farmers will take a look.
That's right. That's right. And I do think, I hope agricultural colleges are being a bit progressive about this and trying to teach this sort of approach. I can't believe that they're ignoring it. So, you know, hopefully we will adapt. Whether as an island we can feed ourselves, or as a planet we can feed ourselves, is another question.
We used to.
Yeah. Then we had the war, and then we had to sort of feed ourselves, and we all ate cabbages and grew stuff in the garden and kept a pig, which I think is a fine system. I don't mind that system. We're all much more healthy as a result. So I don't think it's a bad thing. And that, you know, we shortened supply chains, so we know where food comes from, and it's not a complete mystery when we buy it in Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
I'm going to go.
On that note, exactly.
Beat the kids up.
It's been an hour, so thank you very much, guys, for showing up, and it was a very interesting conversation.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for the invitation, Daniel, and I look forward to a few more weeks like this. If the conversation carries on like this, I will enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Super. See you later.
Take care. Bye bye.
Cheers.